William Walker Atkinson's Reincarnation and the Law of Karma, 1908. Chapter 6 was The Modern West. This is Chapter 7, Between and Beyond Incarnations. One of the first questions usually asked by students of the subject of reincarnation is, where does the soul dwell between incarnations? Does it incarnate immediately after death? And what is its final abode or state? This question, or questions, have been asked from the beginning, and probably will be asked so long as the human mind dwells upon the subject. And many are the answers that have been given to the questioners by the teachers and authorities upon the subject. Let us consider some of the leading and more authoritative answers. In the first place, let us consider that phase of the question which asks, does the soul incarnate immediately after death? Some of the earlier reincarnationists, believed and taught that the soul reincarnated shortly after death. The short period between incarnations being used by the soul in adjusting itself, striking a balance of character, and preparing for a new birth. Others held that there was a period of waiting and rest between incarnations, in which the soul mentally digested the experiences of the last life just completed, and then considered and meditated over the mistakes it had made, and determined to rectify the mistakes in the next life. It being held that when the soul was relieved of the necessities of material existence, it could think more clearly of the moral nature of its acts, and would be able to realize the spiritual side of itself more distinctly, in addition to having the benefit of the spiritual perspective occasioned by its distance from the active scenes of life, and thus being able to better gauge the perspective worthwhileness of the things of material life. At the present time, the most advanced students of the subject hold that the average period of rest between incarnations is about 1,500 years. The more advanced preferring a long period of rest, meditation, and preparation for a new life. It is held that the soul of a gross, material, animal-like person will incarnate very shortly after death. The period of rest and meditation being very short, for the reason that there is very little about which such a soul could meditate, as all of its attractions and desires are connected with material life. Many souls are so earthbound, we could call it, that they rush back at once into material embodiment if the conditions for rebirth are favorable. And they are generally favorable, for there seems to be always an abundant supply of new bodies suitable for such souls in the families of people of the same character and nature, which afford congenial opportunities for such a soul to reincarnate. Other souls which have progressed a little further along the path of attainment have cultivated the higher part of themselves somewhat, and enjoy to a greater extent the period of meditation and spiritual life afforded them. And so, as the scale advances, as the attraction for material life grows less, the period of purely spiritual existence between incarnations grows longer. And it is said that the souls of persons who are highly developed spiritually sometimes dwell in the state of rest for 10,000 years or more, unless they voluntarily return sooner in order to take part in the work of uplifting the world. It must be remembered in this connection that the best teaching is to the effect that the advanced souls are rapidly unfolding into the state in which they are enabled to preserve consciousness in future births, instead of losing it as is the usual case. And thus they take a conscious part in the selection of the conditions for rebirth, which is wisely denied persons of a more material nature and less spiritual development. The next phase of the question, where does the soul dwell between incarnations, is one still more difficult to answer, owing to the various shades of opinion on the subject. Still, there is a fundamental agreement between the different schools, and we shall try to give you the essence or cream of the thought on the subject. In the first place, all occultists set aside any idea of there being a place in which the souls dwell. The existence of states or planes of being, or planes of existence, states or planes of existence being deemed sufficient for the purpose. Those terms. It is held that there are many planes of existence in any and every portion of space, which planes interpenetrate each other, so that entities dwelling on one plane usually are not conscious of the presence of those on another plane. Thus, an inhabitant of a high plane of being, in which the vibrations of substance are much higher than that which we occupy, would be able to pass through our material world without the slightest knowledge of its existence, just as X-rays pass through the most solid object, or as light passes through the air. It is held that there are many planes of existence much higher than the one we occupy, and upon which the disembodied souls dwell. There are many details regarding these planes, taught by the different schools of occultism or spiritualism, but we have neither the time nor space to consider them at length, and must content ourselves with mentioning but a few leading or typical beliefs or teachings on the subject. The Theosophists teach that just when the soul leaves the body, there occurs a process of psychic photography, in which the past life, in all of its details, is indelibly imprinted on the inner substance of the soul, thus preserving a record independent of the brain, the latter being left behind in the physical body. Then the astral body, or etheric double, detaches itself from the body, from which the vital force, or prana jiva, also departs at the same time. The astral body enfolding also the other 4 principles, and together with the 5 surviving principles pass on to the plane of Kamaloka, or the astral plane of desire. Kamaloka is that part of the astral plane nearest to the material plane, and is very closely connected with the latter. If the soul is filled with hot and earnest desire for earth life, it may proceed no further, but may hasten back to material embodiment, as we said a moment ago. But if the soul has higher aspirations, and has developed the higher part of itself, it presses on further, in which case the astral body and the animal soul, which is the seat of the passions and grosser desires, disintegrate, and thus release the triad, or threefold higher nature of the soul, namely the higher human soul, the spiritual soul, and the spirit, or as some term them, the intellect, the spiritual mind, and the spirit. The triad then passes on to what is known as the plane of Devachan, where it rests divested of the lower parts of its nature, and in a state of bliss and in a condition in which it may make great progress by reason of meditation, reflection, etc. Kamaloka has been compared to the purgatory of the Catholics, which it resembles in more ways than one, according to the Theosophists. Devachan is sometimes called the heaven world by the Theosophists, the word meaning the state or plane of the gods. Theosophy teaches that the soul triad dwells in Devachan for a period proportionate to the merit of the being, and from whence, in the proper time, the being is drawn down again to be reborn in the world of mortals. The law of karma, which rules the earth life of man, and which regulates the details of his rebirth, is said to operate on the Devachanic plane as well, thus deciding the time of his abode on that plane, and the time when the soul shall proceed to rebirth. The state of existence in Devachan is described at length in the theosophical writings, but is too complex for full consideration here. Briefly stated, it may be said that it is taught that the life on Devachan is in the nature of a dream of the best that is in us. That is a condition in which the highest that is in us is given a chance for expression and growth and development. The state of the soul in Devachan is said to be one of bliss, the degree depending upon the degree of spiritual development of the soul, as the bliss is of an entirely spiritual nature. It may be compared to a state of people listening to some beautiful music. The greater the musical development of the person, the greater will be his degree of enjoyment. It is also taught that just as the soul leaves Devachan to be reincarnated, it is given a glimpse of its past lives and its present character, that it may realize the karmic relations between the cause and effect, to the end that its new life may be improved upon, and then it sinks into a state of unconsciousness and passes on to rebirth. The Western school of yogi philosophy gives an idea of the state between incarnations, somewhat eclectic in its origin, agreeing with the theosophical teaching in some respects, and differing from it in others. Let's take a hasty glance at it. In the first place, it does not use the terms Kamaloka and Devachan respectively, but instead treats the whole series of planes as the great astral world, containing many planes, divisions, and subdivisions, many subplanes and divisions of the same. The teaching is that the soul passes out of the body, leaving behind its physical form, together with its prana or vital energy, and taking it with the astral body, the instructive mind, and the higher principles. The last vision of the past life, in which the events of that life are impressed upon the soul just as it leaves the body, is held to be a fact. The soul sees the past life as a whole, and in all of its minutest details at the moment of death, and it is urged that the dying person should be left undisturbed in his last moments for this reason, and that the soul may become calm and peaceful when starting on its journey. On one of the astral planes, the soul gradually discards its astral body and its instinctive mind, but retains its higher vehicles or sheaths. But it is taught that this discarding of the lower sheaths occurs after the soul has passed into a soul slumber on a subplane of the astral world, from which it awakens to find itself clothed only in its higher mental and spiritual garments of being, and free from the grosser coverings and burdens. The teachings say, when the soul has cast off the confining sheaths and has reached the state for which it is prepared, it passes on to the plane in the astral world for which it is fitted, and to which it is drawn by the law of attraction. The planes of the astral world interpenetrate, and souls dwelling on one plane are not conscious of those dwelling on another, nor can they pass from one plane to another, with this exception, that those dwelling on a higher plane are able to see, if they so desire, the planes below them in the order of development, and are also able to visit these lower planes if they so desire. But those on the lower planes are not able to either see or visit the planes above them. Not that there is a watchman at the gate to prevent them, but for the same reason that a fish is not able to pass from water to the plane of air above that water. The same teachings tell us that the souls on the higher planes often visit friends and relatives on the lower, so that there is always the opportunity for loved ones, relatives, and friends meeting in this way. And also many souls on the higher planes pass to the lower planes in order to instruct and advise those dwelling on the latter. The result that in some cases there may be a progression from a lower to a higher plane of the astral world by promotion earned by this instruction. Regarding rebirth from the astral world, the teachings say, but sooner or later, the souls feel a desire to gain new experiences, and to manifest in earth life some of the advancement which has come to them since what we call death. And for these reasons, and from the attraction of desires which have been smoldering there, not lived out or cast off, or possibly influenced by the fact that some loved soul on a lower plane is ready to incarnate and wishing to be incarnated at the same time in order to be with it, which is also a desire, the souls fall into the current sweeping toward rebirth and the selection of proper parents in advantageous circumstances and surroundings, and in consequence, again, fall into a soul slumber gradually. And so when their time comes, they, so to speak, die to the plane upon which they have been existing and are born into a new physical life and a body. A soul does not fully awaken from its sleep immediately at birth, but exists in a dreamlike state during the days of infancy, its gradual awakening being evidenced by the growing intelligence of the babe, the brain of the child keeping pace with the demands made upon it. In some cases, the awakening is premature, and we see cases of prodigies, child genius, etc., but such cases are more or less abnormal and even unhealthy. Occasionally, the dreaming soul in the child half awakes and startles us by some profound observation or mature remark or conduct. The third phase of the question, what is the final state or abode of the soul, is one that reaches to the very center or heart of philosophical and religious thought and teaching. Each philosophy and religion has its own explanation or interpretation of the truth, and it is not for us to attempt to select one teaching from the many in this work. The reader will find many references to these various explanations and teachings as he reads the several chapters of this book, and he may use his own discrimination and judgment in selecting that which appeals to him the most strongly. But he will notice that there is a fundamental agreement between all of the teachings and beliefs, the principle that the movement of the soul is ever upward and onward, and that there is no standing still in spiritual development and unfoldment. Whether the end, if end there be, is the reaching of a state of bliss in the presence of the Divine One, or whether the weary soul finds rest in the bosom of the Father by what has been called union with God, the vital point for the evolving soul is that there is a better day coming, a haven of rest around the turn of the road. And whatever may be the details of the truth, the fact remains that whatever state awaits the soul finally, it must be good, and in accordance with divine wisdom and ultimate justice and universal love. The majority of occultists look forward to an end in the sense of being absorbed in the divine being, not in the sense of annihilation, but in the sense of reaching a consciousness of the whole in the whole. This is the true meaning of nirvana. But whether this is true, or whether there is a place of final rest in the highest spiritual realms other than in the sense of absorption in the divine, or whether there is a state of eternal progression from plane to plane, from realm to realm, on and on, forever Godward, and more God-like, the end must be good, and there is nothing to fear. For the power that rules here, rules there, and everywhere. And remember this, ye seekers after ultimate truths, the highest authorities inform us that even the few stages or planes just ahead of us in the journey are so far beyond our present powers of conception that they are practically unknowable to us. This being so, it will be seen that states very much nearer to us than the end must be utterly beyond the powers not only of our understanding but also of our imagination, even when strained to its utmost. And this being so, why should we attempt to speculate about the end? Instead, why not say with Newman, I do not ask to see the distant scene. One step is enough for me. Lead thou me on. It is said that when Thoreau was dying, a friend leaned over and, taking him by the hand, said, Henry, You are so near to the border now. Can you see anything on the other side? And the dying Thoreau replied, "One roll at a time, Parker." And this seems to be the great lesson of life. One plane at a time. But though the veil of ice is impossible of being lifted entirely, still there is a something that enables one to see, at least dimly, the features of the goddess behind the veil. And that something is that intelligent faith that knows, although it is unable to explain even to itself. And the voice of that something within informs him who has that faith, all is well, brother. For beyond planes and states and universes and time and space and name and form and things, there must be that which transcends them all and from which they all proceed. Though we may not know what that is, the fact that it must exist, that it is sufficient to guarantee that the law is in constant operation on all planes, from the lowest to the highest, and that the cosmos is governed by law. And this being so, not even an atom may be destroyed, nor misplaced, nor suffer injustice, and all will attain the end rightly, and know that Satchidananda of the Hindus, the being, wisdom, bliss absolute, that all philosophers and religions agree upon, is the final state of the blessed. And to the occultist, all are blessed, even to the last soul in the scale of life. And over all the tumult and strife of life, there is always that something, that silently brooding, watching and waiting, the life, light, and love of the all. Such is the message of the illumined of all ages, races, and lands. Is it not worthy of our attention, our consideration? Chapter 8 will be the justice of reincarnation.